Middle East Studies Association, or PEMESA, the Department of International Relations of the Mindanao State University main campus, the Mindanao State University General Santos and College of Administration of the Bukidnon State University. As have been mentioned in our announcement, this lecture will focus on the challenges experienced by states in the Middle East in the last 40 years, such as legitimacy, economy, matters concerning domestic politics, and their foreign policy. The webinar shall look into the future of the state in the light of such challenges. Before we start, let me just reiterate some of our house rules. Please make sure that your microphones are muted while the lecture is going on. And everyone is encouraged to turn on their cameras if possible, but if your internet connection is unstable, you may choose to turn off your cameras to optimize audio streaming. During the open forum, please click the raise or the Q&A, the raise a hand button of the interface and wait for the to be recognized before speaking. Or you may choose to just post your questions in the Q&A box and allow the moderator to read it for you during the open forum. Make sure you observe orderliness and courtesy throughout the event. Thank you. Now, to give his opening remarks, please welcome the Dean of the UP Asian Center, Dr. Henelito A. Sevilla, Jr.
Thank you very much, Professor Noe Pubadora, the Director of the ASEAN Center of the New Era University, for accepting our invitation to be the Master of Ceremony for tonight's event. Our distinguished speaker this evening, Dr. Mahjoob Zweiri, Director of the Gulf Studies Center, Qatar University. The panel of reactors, Professor Beverly Garcia, Graduate School of Mindanao State University, General Santos, Professor Mark Isla, Associate Dean of the Far Eastern University, faculty, students, and friends of UP Asian Center and the Philippine Middle East Studies Association, a pleasant good evening to all of you. Assalamu alaikum. This evening's webinar is one of the series of activities that UP Asian Center and the Philippine Middle East Studies Association have organized in partnership with other state universities in the country. In the last two webinars that we have at the UP Asian Center, our invited speakers discuss about the critical role of the state in addressing pressing issues such as the issues of women's rights in Turkey and how South Korean government acted the most recent Afghan refugees crisis. Now, tonight's event, we continue to listen and discuss the role of the state in the Middle East region. In particular, how these regional states confront and manage socio-economic, political, security, foreign policy, and even socio-cultural challenges brought about by the conflicting forces of globalization, regionalism, nationalism, Islamism, and perhaps tribalism. The current socio-political structure that created layers of political authority and loyalty, as expressed through a hybrid sovereignty, where nation-state coexists but in constant friction with Islam and tribal political organization, is another perspective which can be considered in studying the effectivity of the modern states in addressing pressing societal issues. For many who are not so exposed to the region, the Middle East and North Africa is in constant flux of controversies, conflicts, military adventurism, and instability. Western media, such as BBC and CNN, have always shown this ugly side of the region repeatedly. However, several countries in the region have also achieved relative political security and economic stability. Although some of them are small countries, their ability to diversify and create socio-economic impact on their citizens and migrant workers is well defined and manifested in the progress and development they have instituted and achieved in the past decades now. Moreover, in spite of this duality, common problems such as, but not limited to, youth bulging and unemployment, insecurity, poverty, starvation, drought and climate change, water supply, women's future role, refugees, etc., continue to challenge the efficacy of the state. In addition to this, old and resolved security issues such as the US-Iran diplomatic tug of war, Israeli-Palestinian issue, Syrian civil war, among others, still contribute to the regional instability. In recent decades, we also have seen the prominence of the asymmetrical organizations such as the Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, and other non-state actors questioning the legitimacy of many governments and their Western-oriented policy. With all this in mind, I would like to pose these questions. How those states in the region respond to these challenges? Number two, in the presence where non-state actors are challenging the state legitimacy, how regional government respond to this? Number three, in the presence of conflicting national interests by neighboring states, what is the prospect for regional cooperation? And lastly, what will be the future of the states in the region? Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me welcome our speaker, Dr. Mahjoob Zweiri, and the participants to this forum. Wassalamualaikum, magandang gabi sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much for this introduction, and it gives me great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. The reason why I chose to talk about this topic in particular is to share with you some of the conclusions I had made after more than 70 studies on the region, and maybe to test some of the conclusions I have reached to. And to put my lecture in a context, I will be looking at the state in the Middle East, focusing on the Levant in particular, where Egypt, Levant, which includes Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine, and also the Gulf region, Yemen, and basically. And if you look at how this region is being formed, it's important to remind of a few facts. Fact number one, most of this region was controlled by Ottomans for a while. And after Ottomans, it was colonized by British, and some of British, some of it by French. In the Gulf region, we don't have a colonization. We have sort of protectors, sort of protection, sort of agreements. But when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Jordan, Iraq, there was different political status. In Egypt, the same. We know what happened as well. So post the colonization era, history tells us about the state formation in the Middle East, where different states had emerged, whether monarchies or republicans. And those states basically, the only thing they are sharing is that they belong to Arab culture. All of them, they are Muslim. Majority of their population are Muslim, and they suffered, from being for a while under colonized powers. Of course, there was lack of resources, with the exception of the Gulf region. If you look at this era between, I would say, end of First World War until the beginning of 70s, where the 3 or 4 Gulf states emerged, Qatar, Emirates, and Bahrain. This time it was, as a whole, as the period as a whole, was actually state formation time. And most of those states, they were, moving in a field of means, actually, because there are a lot of difficulties, economic, political difficulties. There were military coup in Egypt, military coup in Iraq, military coup in Sudan, in Yemen. There was a confrontation and competition between monarchs in Saudi Arabia and Republican in Egypt. And on the top of that, you have the Palestinian question itself and the new realities in the region, which is the occupation. So with those challenges, the state in the Middle East, they basically lost the momentum of state formation, and they moved to the challenge of the occupation, especially the neighboring of Palestine. And they went through a lot of difficulties. They had support from states in the Gulf, but still they were suffering a lot. One of the major elements in all of this is you have central governments, you have a military institution very strong, you have a security apparatus very strong, and you have less representation in politics. So all of those governments, they are basically a one-man show in a way or other. Now, after 1970s, if you add to the Arab countries and the neighboring Arab countries like Turkey and Iran, they were facing the same challenges. Iran had a coup in 1953. Turkey the same, a military coup in 1980. And also Iran in 1978, the Islamic Revolution. So if I want to describe this era, I would say, I would describe it as instability, the main title. Instability when it comes to politics, when it comes to the state stability, economic stability, and institutional instability, which basically had ramification on the region as a whole. Now, the question was always about, how those states survived. There are two explanations for that from my perspective. The first one is most of those states were divided in the era of Cold War between Soviet Union and the United States. So some of them are protected by the United States, some of them are protected by the Soviet Union, and basically that's the reason for surviving. The other reason, I think, whether the monarch or the Republicans, they were able to strengthen their ties with the people within their countries and using different tools. In tribal societies, they strengthen the tie with the tribal leaders, and then indirectly they strengthen the tie with people, their ties with people. And in the countries with where there are institutions, for example, military institution played an important role in most of the countries to bring loyalty, because the time you recruit people to become a part of the military institution, you indirectly guarantee the loyalty of their own families and behind them. So basically, it's a strategy of getting more loyalty from the society, and it did work for a while. Now, when it comes to the Gulf region, of course, the oil has changed the whole dynamics. The idea of frontier state, the oil, the revenue of oil is being shared with the people. The political rights was not really most important. The only exception was Kuwait. Kuwait witnessed since 1961-63 a constitution with elections with more political participation. But having said that, we have to remember there is no political parties. The main social structure is the tribe, and everything done through the tribe as a major political and social structure. There are some ideological representation, like Pan-Arabism, like Muslim Brotherhood, like those are educated in, whether in Egypt, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and other countries, and they come back to the Gulf, but they have less impact within the society. Until the 1980, the general description that the states in the Middle East, they had this kind of feeling of in control. Of course, it is impossible to forget what was happening in Egypt at that time, the emerging of terrorist groups and targeting the terrorism in Egypt. But having said that, it was a very local phenomena. It wasn't regional. It wasn't really an other side. The collapse of the Pahlavi regime in Iran was a wake up to the states in the region, to the other states in the region. First of all, the Pahlavis was the most strong monarch in the region, strong ally of the United States, strong ally with Israel, recognized Israel in 1949, was the friend of the United States, was called the police of the Gulf, and has the strongest intelligence department, Savak. This regime, in a matter of 90 days, collapsed. In September 78, the CIA office in Tehran, sent a telegram to Washington saying all of those, demonstration are not changing the reality. The regime is solid. Less than 3 months, the regime is gone, and then you have the Islamic Republic of Iran. What does that mean to the states in the region? 3 things. 1, changing priorities from state formation, state building, to stabilizing the existence of the states. Number 2, there is an ideological state facing states are not religious, not secular, are in between. So a country with an ideological discourse criticizing the United States, criticizing the alliances of the United States. And number 3, country defined its own interest beyond its borders. Countries normally they define their interests within their own borders. The Islamic Republic of Iran came 1980, defined its own national security beyond its own borders. To be secure in Tehran, you have to be in Damascus, you have to be in Iraq, you have to be in Yemen, you have to be in Kabul. So this changed the whole dynamic in the region. A new threat, a new challenge to the states in the region. So the states have to tackle this. How? In the region, in the Gulf region, they formed GCC as a response. They supported Saddam Hussein so he can defeat the Islamic Republic of Iran. He managed, he did not. But Iran remained as a major player in the region. Iran under sanctions since 1980, sorry. And with all of this, managed to intervene in politics in different countries, sometimes under the reason, sectarianism, Shiism, sometimes using the Palestinian cause and criticizing those who sign with Israel, and helping those who are oppressed by countries or by oppressed governments, and also they try to offer a new narrative, a new discourse about the right the people for change. That was a wake-up call, annoying every state in the region, not only in the Gulf. And that's the reason where Iran actually lost its own diplomatic relation with all neighboring countries. The 1980s, Iran, with the war with Iraq, in a way or other, lost the ties with the Arab world, most of the Arab states, even with Turkey. But the invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein in 1990 was a gift to Iran. Iran rejected the invasion and immediately stand by Kuwait and by GCC with the Americans, and they said Saddam Hussein should be kicked out of Kuwait. That was an opportunity to Iran to reintroduce itself and to rebuild its relation with the Gulf. And that's something. It was a gift. If the invasion of Kuwait did not happen, I'm not sure what was the situation will be. The era of 1990s, the major issue to most of the Gulf states is actually Iran politics. They are worried of Iranian-Syrian relation. They are worried of Iran-Hezbollah relations. They are worried of Iran-Hamas relations. They are worried of intervening with Shia communities and trying to support them by media or financially. And also, in 2002, they become more worried when the first image emerged about their nuclear facility in Natanz. So more to be added to the reason of concern about Iran. In all of those stages, the states basically, they still continued their role on controlling the society, more security concerns, less political participation, or limited political participation, or designed political participation. Is not real, is not genuine. There is a new change. Most of the countries enter a phase of basically have less control on economy, the privatization of economy, and trying to open the door before outsiders or some people to work on the infrastructure, which basically increase the price of the services in different sectors: health, education, communication, and this basically started to create a wide gap between the governments and the people. Of course, in oil countries, situation was worsening or become better, relying on oil price. And when the oil price is good, things are shiny. If not, things countries were trying to manage those crises. In this era, we witnessed a major shift in 1992, which is the starting of the what's so-called peace process between Israel and Arab world, which is started in Madrid conference, which followed by Wad al-Arab agreement, Jordan, Israel, and then Oslo agreement, Palestinian and the Israelis. And last year between Emirat and Israel and Bahrain and Israel. Of course, Egypt in 1978. So there is a change of dynamic between Israel and a neighboring Arab countries, which was designed to recreate what's so-called the new Middle East, which Shimon Peres talked about, and even Benjamin Netanyahu and Ross, the American envoy to the Middle East, about a new Middle East, which I think all of them, they basically, their prediction failed in reality. One of the new developments in this era is the emerging of non-state actors. Non-state actors here, you talk about militia, like Hezbollah. You talk about some of the groups supporting by outsiders. We witnessed this in Yemen, like Houthi. And as an outcome of the Iraq invasion in 2003 by the Americans, we witnessed the emerging of many non-state actors in Iraq until today. The collapse of the Pahlavi regime and the collapse of Saddam Hussein regime and the collapse of Egypt, Mubarak, and Yemen, and Muammar al-Gaddafi, all of those were wake-up calls that the region is moving. The region is not capable to continue as it was. So there was a call for reform. There was a call to change the status quo. There was a call that the status quo does not fit the 21st century, does not fit the social media, does not fit with higher percentage of well-educated people, does not fit with the global change. There is a call for change. Now, some of the countries, they are responding, some of them quickly, some of them slowly, and some of them, they make different choices. Country like Saudi Arabia, they believe that social freedom is a priority to the Saudis. So let's have fun. Let's have celebration. Let's have entertainment. That's will be solving the problems. Country like Qatar, they went for Shura elections. 30 people elected, 15 were selected, and the Shura Council started working yesterday. Kuwait, already they have Shura. In Oman, the same. In Bahrain, a very, very, very weird process there. In other countries, there is trying an attempt to do reform, but there is also a level of hesitance. Step forward, step back. There is a serious concern of what will be the outcome. Now, I think we have now in the region, I would say, 3 categories in the Middle East. We have, I would call them a stable states. We have failed state, and we have fragile states. Most of those, the fragile states, unfortunately, they are moving toward becoming failed states. And there are also some states who seem to be solid and strong, but they delay the reform. They are actually facilitating their direction toward a failed state. The economy is the key. The lack of the corruption, the expansion of the corruption is a disaster in the society. The quality of life is becoming very bad. There is lack of justice, lack of opportunities, and also there is a corrupted political life. The institutions are also being weakened. You know, you look at education, you look at health, you look at military institutions are weakened in a way or other in some states, which caused a lot of question mark about, you know, how those states were capable to continue. So to sum up, you know, one may ask, where is the external players from all of that? Actually, they are there on all those stages. Sometimes they prefer to advise countries to push them for reform, but the country is rejected. Sometimes they just enjoy watching what happened. And we witnessed this in the Arab Spring in Egypt, for example, what the American president, Barack Obama, for example, what he did. So it seems the external players, they have chosen to watch, observe, and make the intervention when they feel that their interest is in danger. I will stop here and I'll be happy to receive your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Zweiri, for you have given us a strong understanding of the context, especially those which pertains to the developments in the Middle East throughout the decades up to the present, especially when you trust about the interaction between the state and non-state actors, and which contribute to the dynamics of the process. Now, the discussion is just about to become more livelier and engaging. So we may now proceed to hearing the reactions from two of our colleagues in the PEMESA. First, we have from the Mindanao State University, General Santos, Professor Beverly Garcia, and second, we have from Far Eastern University, Professor Mark Isla. Professor Garcia, may we hear your reaction now, please?
Thank you very much, Professor Novi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wal barakatuh. It's a great opportunity to have you here tonight, Professor Zweiri.
Thank you.
And we're very thankful that you give an account to what's happened really in the state of the Middle East. Of course, we wanted to hear a very positive story from the Middle East, because like what was mentioned by Dr. Sevilla, we were, in our minds, there's a lot of negative image when we talk about Middle East. But hoping to make this negative image positive, that's why we really concentrated on the lecture that you shared with us. So from the events of conflict that happened to the Middle East, you know, there are very numerous conflict that took place in the Middle East, including the Arab Rising, and of course in 2014 the war in Syria. But even if it's like that, there are lots of cooperation, socio-political and economic cooperations that are forged with these Middle East states in order to really have economic reform. And one of the development that that happened during this era is the emergence of the non-state actors, which are very, very instrumental for the call for change. And for that, we see that there is a kind of positive thing that will really take place in the future of the Middle East states. So my question is this. Is there a sufficient space for demographic homogeneity to territorially and constitutionally satisfy all the identities of the region? Where does the individual stand in all this with their personal identities and social political rights? Thank you.
Would you allow Dr. Zweiri to answer the question, or we'll proceed to Professor Isla first to react?
I think it would be nice if he will answer it direct,
All
because
right.
I meant to
All right. Okay.
Sorry, the question I cannot get it correctly. I'm sorry.
Okay, I will repeat, Doctor.
Yeah,
Is
please.
there a sufficient space or demographic homogeneity to territorially and constitutionally satisfy all the identities of the region? Where does the individual stand in all this with their personal identities and social and political rights?
Well, I think absolutely, the question of identity, whether, a gender identity, political identity, tribal identity, this is an open for discussion in the region now for nearly 20 to 30 years. And I do believe that still the debate goes on simply for two reasons. One, the states try to reshape their own state identity so they can cross sub-identities like tribal identity, political identity, like family identity, or they try to have an umbrella for everyone, which I call it the state identity, and they try to promote this through education, the media, and to bring what in common. Of course, this process, it will take some time. For example, in case of Qatar, the current blockade did contribute a lot to consolidate this and to bring people together because of the crisis from outside. I'm not sure about other countries. There is no doubt there's imbalance when it comes to demography in the Gulf. There are population comparing with expats, it's 10% to 80, 90%, 90%. And that's also another challenge when it comes to the identity, especially the expats. They are skilled, they come with expertise, and they come also with their culture, with themselves. And so to maintain the local culture, it does a lot of effort. It does require a lot of effort from the state, and that is also done. But it will take some time, and there will be unseen, I would say, confrontation between different cultures and different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. It's debatable. It's hard to say that the story ended. It's still going on, and the more we see open access to the information because of the social media and information technology, the more the question about identity become more complicated. Because I think in Manila or in Doha or in Amman, we live half our life there and half our life in other places because of this phone and because of this TV. Actually, we are divided ourselves. We cannot guarantee that. I always talk to my students. We are divided. We have friends, with 14 hours different traveling, maybe more than we have people who are surrounding us. And these are changes also reflecting on our identity. We become more selective. It's no longer about family. It's no longer about a tribe, not about blood relations. It's beyond about, how much this person is actually close to my way of thinking, my lifestyle. If he or she, that's good, that's the person I can communicate with. And it becomes a global identity rather than a local identity.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Zweiri. Now, shall we proceed to Professor Mark Isla's reaction?
Thank you very much, Professor Noe. And thank you, Professor Mahjoob, for that very interesting insights about the Middle East. What I like about the discussion is that the fact that you were able to present briefly the disruption and continuity in the Middle Eastern region. You talk about important things like nation building process, the rise of nationalist ideas, and how it creates instability in the domestic situation, and how such instabilities impede the continuing process of nation building. I think all of these against the backdrop of the oil discovery and of course the rise of ideological discourse, and also the rise of non-state actors, particularly in the Levant area. So I'm really interested in knowing further what would be the future of the Middle East, particularly if we talk about the security flashpoints that somehow redrawing the political security landscape in the region. Most importantly, when we talk about the collapse of the different authoritarian regime brought by the Arab Spring in 2011. Also, we want to actually know more about what would be the impact of the Iran nuclear deal, the deal that was brokered by the United States and other Western countries. And of course, you also have the ongoing issue of the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, whether the two-state solution is exactly the way to go. And we also kind of recognize the developments, as you mentioned, in the Middle East region, particularly the reforms made by Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia right now is stepping up in terms of its foreign policy efforts because of what happened during the Arab Spring. They also kind of initiated several societal reforms, right? And I'm also interested to know what would be the future in terms of the interaction between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Okay, while Iran is trying to compete for regional dominance. And lastly, I'm also kind of interested to know more about the economic landscape of the Middle East. How the Middle East is trying to diversify its economy, creating model with less reliance on oil. What are the steps being taken by the Middle Eastern countries so that economic development would be felt in the grassroots, because that's exactly the problem that they've encountered during the Arab Spring. And one of the reasons why people are revolting, it's because they don't feel the economic development that their countries are actually experiencing. And I think one of the last questions I wanted to pose would be, what would be the future of the Middle East once America starts to move away from a Middle Eastern-centric foreign policy? I think that would be all. And thank you very much once again, Professor, for sharing your insights.
Pleasure. Very, very important question, and I'll group them together on my answers. There is a level of uncertainty about three things in the region. One, the security situation. Secondly, the region after the gradual American withdrawal. And thirdly, uncertainty about region without oil. Those are the three uncertainty. I see them emerging and have impact. When it comes to the Americans, there is no doubt that the Americans, since Barack Obama, started with three strategies. Leading from behind, Barack Obama, America First, Donald Trump, and leading by diplomacy, Antony Blinken. Those are three pillars. Explain to me the reposition of the United States in the region, because those three statements, they came in the context of Middle East. And I think if this is a situation, it's likely that America will redesign, reposition its own politics in the region, this time relying on how much its own interest will be secured with less costly, with less cost on their economy. Of course, this will take some time. This will rely on how much American economy itself surviving the COVID-19 and post COVID-19 impact, and also what will be the outcome of this confrontation with China. China now is playing in the American platforms. Wherever America has a platform, the Chinese come and say, I prefer this platform, I want to play here. And that's, of course, pissed off the Americans. And I think that itself may delay the American withdraw from the region here, because they see China is actually mobilizing itself to come to the region more, whether for energy or for other reason. In this context, we see that Arab Gulf states and other Arab states, they try to diversify their economy by opening up for investments. And who are the investments? Chinese investments. So the Americans will say, oh my God, we don't need them. Chinese come with less cultural threats, with no talk about human rights, no talk about freedom. This is the money, we need money, goodbye. And that is, that's something good for any, political system that's not interested to talk about human rights and democracy and other stuff. And I think I see that some of, I would say most of Arab countries, they are open up to Chinese, to invest in their economy in different levels. We see them in Egypt, we see them in Sudan, we see them here in the Gulf, in Saudi Arabia, in the United Arab Emirates, in Kuwait, even in Oman, Qatar. So there are some, they are improving their economic relations with different countries. When it comes to the nuclear deal, I will comment on this in the context of Saudi-Iranian relations. I think you and other colleagues and attendees, you follow the news in the last few months that there is a mediation, Iraqi mediation between Iran and Saudi Arabia. My own assessment of this is it is not genuine. What's happening is a tactic from both countries, from the Iranians, from the Saudis, to buying time so they can see what will happen in the region. The region is suffering from political liquidity, American uncertainty. There is a lot of political vacuums. There is lost in Yemen when it comes to Saudi Arabia. Emiratis is not helping Saudis as they should. Saudis have a bad relation with Pakistan. So there is a need for exit strategy. That exit strategy is to engage with Iran. Iran itself, they are worried about a nuclear deal. There is serious political pressure on them. and economic pressure. There are three crises overnight: fall of Kabul, Azerbaijan, and a new election in Iraq. A new election in Iraq with a new platform. All of those who are the friend of Iran lost seats, and they become number 4 or 5 and 6 instead of being number 1, 2, 3. The groups who are leading, not necessarily the friend of Iran, Muqtada Sadr Shia, but not necessarily the friend of Iran. So there are suddenly, overnight, on the desk of the Iranian diplomats or officials, huge things dump in their files. So how to handle all of this? So the discussion with Saudi Arabia is time out. Let's talk with Saudi Arabia. Let's try to see what can we do. I don't see it as a strategy. I see it as a tactic. Why I see this? Because at the time they talk about discussion, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia comes and say, the nuclear Iran is a real threat to the region. And he says, in the sixth round of negotiation in Vienna, the 5+1 should brought the regional role of Iran to a discussion. This will not please Iran. So there is sort of conflict of messages about it. However, I think because of this political liquidity and concern, I believe they will continue on this attempt of negotiation. When it comes to the security situation, I think there is a level of uncertainty. There is a real concern of non-state actors. There is a level of concern of anger because of economic situations. You know, the governments, they cannot absorb any social movement, any demonstration, any criticism. So the security environment is felt. You can see it. You know, they don't accept criticism easily. Those governments who are facing the problems. So I think there is level of securitization in countries like Egypt, in countries like Tunisia today, in country like Saudi Arabia. There is, you know, serious concern about the security situation. Of course, the center, the main conflict is the Arab-Israeli conflict, is hanging. First of all, there is no real partners in Israel. The Palestinian Authority is falling apart because basically the leadership itself is weak, is incapable, and I think they don't have to offer. No one is ready to mediate. The Americans are not ready. Donald Trump complicated the whole thing by opening the embassy in Jerusalem. So there is a serious change against the whole process. So the conflict basically is hanging around. Gaza is suffering itself, you know, without any kind of real support, but some support coming from Qatar. The Egyptians now, they try to gain or to create sort of position for themselves by calling for Palestinian meetings and convince Palestinians to speak to the new Prime Minister of Israel. I'm not sure this will lead to a result anytime soon.
Right. Unless there is any follow-up from our reactors, we will now proceed to the other participants. Actually, a proof that this webinar is really getting interesting is, of course, visible here in our text, in our quick Q&A box, because we're flooded with a lot of questions. And
Wow.
so to entertain now, the first question coming from our participant to start off with our open forum. And I would like to read the question of Professor Denise Ann Suarez. Her question is, regarding what has currently transpired in Afghanistan, would you say it's a failed state? And what was the role of external actors? And what are its geopolitical security implications?
I think what happened in Afghanistan reminds me exactly what happened in Gaza 2005. Exactly. what happened in Afghanistan, it was obvious that there was a non-state actor called Taliban, was capable, was influential in Yemen, in Afghanistan, sorry, and he was engaged in agreement with the Americans, with the mediation of Qatar. The central government, they were happy with that. There was a movement toward national government. Taliban, by 15th of August, they control Kabul according to their own responsibility. I heard it personally. I heard it from the acting foreign minister of Taliban just last week. I heard it from him in a talk. He said, people called us from Kabul to come and to secure Kabul. He said, we had no interest to do this. Whether this is true or not, happened now. They are controlling Kabul. They are controlling Afghanistan. The world does not want to recognize them. That itself, a big question mark, because this reminds you of, if the Americans don't want to recognize them, why they sign with them agreement in Doha? Why, if they don't believe them as a partner, why they accepted them as a partner to facilitate their withdrawal from Afghanistan? It seems to me that Taliban has been used to justify to the Americans that the Americans have done a great job in Afghanistan, and then they are now withdraw after signing with Taliban, the main enemy. I think my personal assessment that the world has two options: to transfer Taliban to another base for terrorism and instability, which can be affected not only the region around Afghanistan, but the global, or recognize and having a real politique, recognize who are there and enforce them to acknowledge and to accept international law, which includes all matters. But having said that, we have to realize as well that Taliban is suffering. They are between two kinds of pressure. The Afghani society itself is by nature conservative, and don't look at Kabul. Kabul itself, it is the capital, but there are other provinces. They are very conservative. For example, they cannot force them to send their girls to the school. So, do they expect from them to take the girls to the schools? The question is, and I think I was in the meeting when the journalist from BBC asked the foreign minister, she said to him, why 70% of the girls are going to the school and 100% of the boys? And his answer to her was, why you don't ask this to the Americans? They were in Afghanistan 20 years. We are now running Afghanistan 2 months. Ask them why they did not convince the Afghani families to send their girls. His answer, I think it does make sense, because he is Afghani. He knows the nature of his society. Of course, this is not enough. Maybe they need to do more. They need to give people a guarantee that it is safe. Maybe the family is worried about the security of their girls. Maybe they are worried about what is being taught. Maybe they need to reform the education system so they can give assurances to the people, to the families. But I think, personally, I see the recognition of Taliban as a government, and avoiding, the hunger. 20 million Afghani will not have food in a matter of 3 weeks. 28 million. They will not have food, basic need for food. What does that mean? How this will help in stability, how this will help on avoiding other consequences. I think the world need to be realistic. and help Afghanistan, the people, and find a way to deal with Taliban as the main power now running the country. Find a way to deal with them, but they cannot punish Afghanis because Taliban there. They already punish people in Gaza, 1,600,000 people in Gaza. They are punishing them because Hamas there. I think this pattern is a crime against civilians. It should not continue, and there should be some of the human feelings with those people who are suffering.
Thank you very much. I find this question very interesting, and this came from an anonymous attendee. His question is, with the advent of climate change and the economic adjustments, it will inevitably entail what proactive measures or steps are governments in the region planning to do in anticipation of this eventuality? And how prepared are they to meet these challenges going on into the future in terms of ensuring social and economic stability?
What I see that in the Gulf, there is a real move toward clean energy. Recently, Qatar changed the Ministry of Oil to become Ministry of Energy. It is, in the statement they release, because they are serious on moving towards clean energy, and they want to work with other countries on the climate change issue. This is for the future of the generations, and they try to look at every economic change. They are doing it also from this perspective as much as they can. Of course, this will require budgets. This will require, sometime major changes in some economic sectors. It will take some time, but there are steps from the countries, especially in the Gulf. Other countries, I think they are slow simply because of the financial, I would say, reasons. This requires a lot of financial support, and I think some of the countries, they don't have it yet.
Okay, so here's another question from Emivin Suelto. You mentioned about how some GCC states like Qatar are slowly giving their citizens some sort of representation by having elections, as the old system that hinges on a single leader is no longer tenable in the age of social media. Do you think this will finally bring about genuine representation in the way GCC states are governed?
Gender representation?
I think genuine representation.
Genuine. Yeah, genuine. Yeah, I think, look, at the end of the day, I think, every society had its own categorization and its own specification. I think, in the case of Qatar, what I as an observer, I think it's a genuine move. It comes from top down. They facilitate the elections, and yesterday the Amir made it clear in the first speech that the expectation of this Majlis, this Shura parliament, is to review a lot of laws and legislation, and make the second Majlis internal representation better. So they open the platform, and they expect people to devote and put effort on that. I think we have to wait to wait and see. In country like Kuwait, there is also a political move, but also there are some obstacles because still, I think the nature of the players, the sub-identities, the tribal identity, the ideological identities, also causing some of difficulties in the political life. But generally speaking, that's what they can do. You cannot expect more than this, because if you force change in a society who is not ready, it will be backfire on the system.
All right. So here's a question from Mr. Erwin Puhawan. It has something to do with kafala. What is your take on the kafala, and what are the attempts to reform it?
Kafala.
Yes, kafala.
I think it's already reformed. I think now all expats, they can change their work and move from company to company without restriction. Is it true? It's a bureaucratic just department. I think from last year, I know in Qatar people, they can move from job to job easily. It may take some time just for departmental work, but it has been changed at least now for more than 1 year.
Here's a question from Godfrey Mordeno. With the Afghanistan taken over by the nationalist Islamist Taliban, what do you think are the recalibration of other Gulf states in terms of their diplomatic priorities? Is it safe to say that there is an emerging consolidation and crystallization of Islamic countries as the Crescent region?
First of all, I don't think so that any of the Gulf states, they designed their relation with Taliban based on Islamization. That's not true. I don't see this exist at all. I mean, I'm observing, the mediation of Qatar with Taliban. Qatar made it very clear that Taliban should respect international law, should allow females to go to school, should be inclusive to all Afghani people. They made it very clear, and I don't see that there is an ideological element in that. I think it was obvious that the religious reason is not in the actually playing any role. I think none of the Gulf states, they look or they develop their relation based on that, because none of them even recognized Taliban until now, even Qatar.
Here's a curious question from Emevin Suelto. I would like to know what impact, if any, did the COVID-19 pandemic have on the nation building and the health of the states in the Middle East? Have states become more fragile, or were these fragile states pushed into becoming failed states because of the pandemic?
No doubt. COVID did question the abilities and the capacity of the state to face challenges. And I think it's one of the issues will be remembered by people about how the states managed COVID-19. There are states did fantastic jobs. There are states actually failed. They locked people down, locked their houses. But despite all of that, the cases were gone to the sky. So there is a lot of debate about state performance when it comes to COVID-19. A lot of question marks about how much the state done enough to tackle this. And those states who are criticized, the list of criticism is increasing. And I think this also creates more mistrust between them and their own people, and also add fragility to the states as well.
Here's a participant from Jiangsu University in China, and he has two questions. I hope we can accommodate all of this. First question is, last year, Turkish President Erdogan, with reference to the Gulf countries, posted a video on his Twitter saying, these countries did not exist yesterday, and perhaps they will cease existing in the near future. But God Almighty will continue raising our flag in this region forever. How do you think the Erdogan factor will affect the dynamics of Gulf states politically and diplomatically? His second question is, do you think Tawhid will be highlighted in the future as basis of oneness of West Asian states towards a supranational entity? If so, how will this affect or modify the roles of the Gulf Cooperation Council or even the Arab League? What prospects do you see for political Islam in terms of interstate dynamics?
When it comes to the Erdogan's speeches, to be honest, I have no. At the end of the day, he's the president of the country. He can say whatever he wants. And I don't see that. I don't see that. Any comments is from my side will make difference. At the end of the day, he's a type of leader who said who says of what he believes in, regardless. I mean, he talked about 10 ambassadors should go, otherwise they have to do this, and he did it. And then they changed their mind a few days ago about one of the Turkish businessmen. Actually, I have nothing to say about this question. What about the other question?
I think the other question is, do you think Tawhid will be highlighted in the future as basis of oneness of West Asian states towards a supranational entity? If so, how will this affect or modify the roles of the Gulf Cooperation Council or even the Arab League? What prospects do you see for political Islam in terms of interstate dynamics?
My apology, I did not understand the first part of the question.
Well, we have to pass that out anyway. But should we continue with the question, or we'll have to entertain another? Do you think Tawhid will be highlighted in the future as basis of oneness?
Tawhid.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Tawhid.
What does it mean to Tawhid? Is it a movement, or Tawhid, which we mean the belief? I don't know what does he mean.
Right. I don't know if Dr. Sevilla has something to say about this.
Maybe you can proceed to other questions
all right.
that are relevant.
Okay, thank you, Darren. Thank you very much, Sir Rudy. All right, here's another question from Ms. Hussein Kaisley Ramin. Her question is, from an outsider's point of view, like mine, I think it has something to do with the Israeli-Palestinian question. And she's saying that from an outsider's point of view, I think that the expansion of Zionist movement has become a huge factor in the war and is, of course, not without the aid of international superpowers. Is nationalism a huge contributing factor on the continuing war between the two? And how is it going to affect any possibilities of peace building in the future between the two? Will outside actors like the UN impact any progression on the matter at hand between the Palestinians and the Israelis?
I don't think so. I mean, the United Nations role is very weak, actually, and even the role of supporting refugees is being reduced in recent years. It's very sad. I think this conflict is lacked, players who are sincere, mediators, respecting international laws. They are very straightforward international laws 338 and the 242. They talk about occupations, they talk about realities, they talk about settlements. Those are facts. Any resolution should consider all of this, so they can build peace. Otherwise, this kind of status quo continue, or sometimes a confrontation will start like what we witnessed a few months ago.
There's another question from Ms. N.S. Silva, and the question is, what would be the optimal role of religious minorities, such as Christians, Yazidis, Druze, etc., in the stability and development of the Levantine and Gulf states, in view of their historic role under the Ottoman and secular Arab administrations?
I think minorities should be respected. Should be respected regardless where they live. Should be given their rights. If any mistakes happened in recent years in conflict time, like in Iraq, this does not reflect the reality of Muslim society and Arab society. The historical experience of Arabs and Muslims have many evidence that they are welcoming minorities, and still Christian and Muslim. I live for years in Amman, and our neighbors, all of them are Christian, and we used to exchange visit on Eid and all. So these are not the realities. If something happened in Iraq, it's not because Iraq, it's because of its war zone. When there is a war zone, when there is a conflict, things were changing because there are different players. Normal relations, normal societies are accepting each other, living with each other, and they're accepting each other and accepting the differences. I think that is the main reference. What we saw in recent years in Iraq and other places, these are sad stories happening in a wartime. And in wartime, you know, you can there are a lot of analysis about it. It's not about nature of such society or nature of that minority.
I think we still have
Professor,
time for
sorry,
one last
maybe-
question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking that maybe we can give one or two questions, last
Yes.
question. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we only have two more questions left. Okay. Has the Pandora Papers affected the political legitimacy of the Middle Eastern elites that were compromised with the leaked documents?
There was some debate about them in newspapers, but I think they disappeared after too few days. At the end of the day, people, you know, people with the new media environment, people, they know everything, and you know, it's difficult to hide what's happening. But people also, they are busy with their own life. I mean, what this will add to them? Anyone want to talk? What this will add to them? Basically, you know, they were trying to avoid such discussion because it doesn't you know add anything to them. You know, they know that, you know, some of those leaders, they have money and they hide it in different places, so they, you know, nothing to be discussed.
All right. So this is just one last question from an anonymous attendee. How do you think the Abraham Accords will hold up under the Biden administration?
I think Biden and the American administration, you know, wants this accord to succeed, but I'm not sure that the opportunity is there, because the whole accord, the whole Abraham Accord, happened without focus on Palestinian question. It happened within a security arrangement between those countries to fight Iran. So this Abraham Accord will not solve the problem, the Palestinian question, and will not contribute. And I think that is the reason why Biden administration is worried that maybe this kind of Abraham Accord will bring more confrontation rather than being part of the problem solution. Sorry.
All right. I don't know exactly how much time's left for before we end up this webinar, but unfortunately, I was instructed to just accommodate the questions from the Q&A chat box. And
Yeah,
sorry, I would like to apologize to those whose questions I didn't manage to.
I would love to stay with you, but to be honest with you, in 7 minutes, I have another talk with Istanbul.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mahjoob.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
We will now proceed to the virtual awarding of the certificates of appreciation to our honorable guest speaker. And reactors first. Okay, first our reactors and then to our guest speaker. Okay. I would like to read the content of that. All right. Certificate of appreciation. This certificate is awarded to Beverly Garcia for serving as reactor during the webinar, The Future of the State in the Middle East,
Great.
held on
Thank you.
October 2021 via Zoom. Okay. Given this 27th day of October 2021, signed by the Dean of Asian Center of Dr. Henelito Sevilla Jr. Okay, this
Thank
same
you.
certificate of appreciation is awarded to Mark Salvador Isla. Okay, now let's proceed to the certificate of appreciation to be bestowed to our guest speaker. Certificate of appreciation. This certificate is awarded
Thank you so much.
Mahjoob Zweiri, Dr. Mahjoob Zweiri, for serving as the speaker during the webinar, The Future of the State in the Middle East, held on October 27, 2021 via Zoom, given this 27th day of October 2021, signed by Dr. Henelito Sevilla Jr., Dean of UP Asian Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please send this by email, please. It's a nice...
Professor Mahjoob, we will send to you the questions. If you don't mind, we can have a photo souvenir.
Yeah.
Thank you also for the very stimulating, sharp, informative views about the region.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so can we open our,
Thank you very much, everyone, for gracing this event, and I hope to see you. We hope to see you again in the future activities of UP Asian
Hopefully
Center
in Manila.
Okay. Yes, we will do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Zweiri.
Yes.
Okay, so photos.
Can we
Okay,
invite
so
all the officers and of women and our guests to stay and come a while for our documentation shot? Okay,
okay,
ready?
so let me take the picture.
Okay.
Okay,
Just
1, 2, 3, smile. Again, 1, 2, 3, smile. All right.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much, folks. You're very,
Thank
very
you so
Thank
much.
you, Professor.
Thank
It
you very
was a very good opportunity for us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a great day.
Same to you.